Hello everybody, my name's Liam and I pick fights. I wanted to put out this video today so I could break down where my action is for UFC 257. It's a huge fight night. I know that I'm preaching to the choir. Anybody who's watching this video is already interested in these fights, but it's Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, for all the marbles. This is a huge fight, big stakes. It's going to be a huge event for the UFC, and I'm really looking forward to breaking down my action on this card. I have a lot of it. I was up all night. I was looking at betting lines. I was watching tape. I was getting myself more familiar with some of the fighters on the card that I didn't know their work. And I feel like I came away from that with a pretty good understanding of some of the fights on this card, how they might match up, and where there may be some opportunities to make money. So first and foremost, guys, before I get started with telling you my picks, I want to let everybody know I have a goal for how this channel can grow. UFC 257 is tonight. That's the big show. The next pay-per-view for the UFC is UFC 258, and it's going to be headlined by Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns. It's going to be February 13th in Las Vegas, Nevada. Guys, by that date, February 13th, I want to get my channel up to at least 50 subscribers. I'm currently at something like 28, and I have more people than that have watched the video, so please, if you're watching this video, give me a subscribe, give it a like. I'd really appreciate the support. This is a new channel, and I just made a bunch of investments into this channel. I want to keep growing it, and like I said, I'm willing to sacrifice sleep and my time, effort, energy in order to try and get the best picks that I can to help steward your money more responsibly if you want to bet on MMA, and to have fun, to have a dialogue. And you know, if you want to play my picks, if you want to tail me, that's awesome. Please gamble responsibly. And if you decide that you want to fade my picks, hey, that's awesome too. I love the sport of MMA. It's a complicated sport, and there's many valuable opinions that you could have on a fight. So if you guys have an interesting opinion or a different take on one of these fights, or you're taking action another way, let me know in the comment section below. I'd really appreciate it. Also, guys, if you would like to see what I'm talking about when I'm referencing my bets, everything can be found on BetMMA.Tips/LiamHeslin. That is the third-party tracker that I use to track my bets, and so you can verify that what I'm telling you on here, I'm also I'm posting to that website in addition to written breakdowns for why I'm picking the plays that I'm picking. So without further ado, last thing for you guys, social media. If you guys could give me a follow, I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to start putting out a lot of my betting content right out onto my Instagram, Liam Picks Fights, right out onto my Twitter, @HeslinLiam. So if you guys could follow that, it'll be another way for you to access this content, and it might be a little easier for you. So without further ado, guys, let's get into my action for UFC 257. So I bet everybody that clicks on this video, the first question on your mind is going to be, Liam, you say that you pick fights. Let's hear it. Who's going to win in the main event? Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, who do you got? I don't know if you could see this figure behind me, but he looms large in this conversation. Guys, I'm a big Conor McGregor fan. I'll disclose that up front, okay? I'm not afraid to show my allegiance. When one of us goes to war, we all go to war. Now, I'm just kidding, by the way. But guys, all seriousness, I watched a lot of tape before I came to this conclusion. Dustin Poirier is a great fighter. He's a very serious challenge. I don't mean to undermine him in any way, but I think that past is prologue for what we're going to see in terms of the Conor McGregor-Dustin Poirier matchup. I think Conor is a far more dynamic athlete. I think he's going to be faster than Dustin. I think that he's absorbed significantly less damage. Dustin Poirier's been in a lot of wars. He's been in a lot of really hard fights, especially of late. Wars with the likes of Dan Hooker that have left him, I would say, somewhat compromised. And in addition, guys, I think that Dustin Poirier, while he's a very talented fighter, he's a fighter that tends to absorb a lot of strikes. I think he's been hit with over 100 significant strikes in his last 3 bouts. He was stunned in the first round by Max Holloway, who doesn't really tend to have a ton of one-punch hitting power. I think that against a dynamic finisher, probably the most prolific and dynamic first-round finisher in UFC history, in the likes of Conor McGregor. I think it's going to be really tough for Dustin to survive the early onslaught. I think that Conor McGregor is likely to win this fight. He's likely to win it decisively by knockout in the first or second round. That's a common pick. You might hear a lot of people say that, but I think that it's a common pick because it's right. I think that people that have been watching the fight game long enough have a certain sense of who's a next level talent, and Dustin Poirier is an excellent fighter, and he's beaten some of the very best fighters of his generation. He is one of the best lightweights of his generation, but unfortunately, I just think that there's a class difference in that Conor may sit one day at the table of the all-time greats and the elites in terms of how he's changed the sport, not just how he interacted with the sport. I think Conor McGregor has had a profound impact. Without sounding too biased here, I just think that Conor McGregor's grappling is underrated. I think that Conor McGregor's striking is as good as advertised. And I think that Conor McGregor has a great chance of winning this fight by knockout in the first 5 minutes. So how am I taking action on this fight? Because I don't know if you guys have seen, the line's pretty juiced on Conor McGregor. Right now on my book, it's about -335. I'm going to put my sweatshirt back on because it got a little chilly in here, but I had to represent for Conor. But the way I chose to attack this fight, guys, I decided to play the under 2.5 rounds. I got that priced at -180, so I have 3 units staked on that outcome. And the reason why I bet that fight, now I'll refer to my breakdown from BetMMA.Tips so I can give you an example of the kind of quality of work that I'm trying to produce here. I placed a 3-unit wager on under 2.5 rounds for this fight because historically Conor McGregor is the most potent first-round finisher in lightweight MMA. Only 3 of Conor McGregor's 26 professional fights have gone over 2.5 rounds. His loss versus Khabib, his win versus Nate Diaz, and his win versus Max Holloway. Dustin has been KO'd twice in his career in the first round, including by Conor in their first fight. Dustin was hurt and rocked in the first round of several fights that he won, including the Hooker fight and the Holloway fights. I believe that either athlete is live to finish, and the pace of exchanges will expedite the process by which somebody gets finished. And that being said, right, what the under 2.5 rounds does is it gives me an out in the sense that, this is still a high-stakes fight. I think that I would line Conor McGregor somewhere around -350, -365 in this contest. That being said, I'm not getting a ton of value if it's -335, and, I think it should be lined -360. I'm getting, about 25 cents worth of value on the bet. That's not great. So what I would be looking for is a way to get the same outcome that I think is going to happen, right? I think Conor McGregor is going to knock him out early, but now I'm actually expanding the field of possibility that what if Dustin catches Conor early? I don't think that that's likely to happen. Conor has one of the best chins in the history of MMA, but if anything's possible, and Dustin Poirier is obviously a very hard hitter. So I think that the under 2.5 rounds has a lot of value. I think that -180 is a safe way to play that because I think Conor McGregor is very likely to finish the fight in those first 2 rounds. That's where he's the most dangerous. That's where he's the most focused and committed to his task. And, if the Cerrone fight was any indication, the nice guy gimmick that he has going on right now has nothing to do with the performance in the cage. And the performance in the cage is rapid violence delivered using excellent shot selection. And I think that Conor McGregor is one of the best to ever do it. I think that he's going to prove it again here because Dustin Poirier is as good as advertised, and he's going to get knocked out in the first round, in my opinion. So that's how I am playing that fight, guys. Moving on to some of my other plays for the night. In the co-main event, Dan Hooker, Mike Chandler. This is a huge fight. Dan Hooker's coming off of a loss in a war with Dustin Poirier, a great fight. I heard a bunch of other analysts discussing the fact that You know, this very easily could have been Conor McGregor and Dan Hooker, you know, if he had won one more round of that Poirier fight. So it just gives you some perspective on the kind of quality of Dan Hooker and how skilled and credentialed an opponent that he is. And Mike Chandler's really getting dealt from the bottom of the deck here. This is his first fight in the UFC. He's coming over as a champion, a former champion from Bellator. And Michael Chandler's a great fighter. He's an All-American wrestler from the University of Missouri. He's got great credentials himself. But I think that he's had a lower overall quality of competition in his MMA career. Granted, he fought some quality fighters in Bellator, including the likes of Benson Henderson, including the likes of Brent Primus. But I think that Chandler showed some liabilities in those fights that would cost him immensely, I think, in the UFC. Now, am I writing off the possibility that Michael Chandler could be a force in the UFC lightweight division? No, I'm not doing that, because I think he is going to come in as one of the best wrestlers in the division, especially if Khabib is retired. That being said, when I say he got dealt from the bottom of the deck, Dan Hooker is a horrible matchup for Michael Chandler in a lot of ways. He's younger by about 5 or 6 years. He's longer, got a way longer reach. He's taller. He's got devastating linear weapons like straight punches, uppercuts, and knees that could really devastate somebody who's trying to enter range for takedowns. If you watch the tape on Michael Chandler, he tends to duck his head a lot. He dips into his punches. He generates a ton of power because of that. He's an explosive, scary athlete. You know, I wouldn't put it past Michael Chandler to knock out Dan Hooker. But Dan Hooker is incredibly durable, and he's the more proven guy, I would say, against higher quality opposition. And even in losses against the likes of Paul Felder and Dustin Poirier, I just think Dan Hooker showed a certain class and level to his striking. I think that he showed a certain level of wrestling capabilities that he'll be able to call on should he need to in a defensive capacity for this fight. I think Michael Chandler will be able to get some takedowns. I think that he will probably be spent by the 8-minute mark of the fight or so. I think he will continue to fight through that. He's a competitor through and through. But I think that later in the fight, Dan Hooker to finish becomes more and more live. I think that Dan Hooker is going to be a little more defensively responsible in this fight than he was in the Poirier fight. I think that there's some lessons learned from the Poirier fight that Dan Hooker is going to bring to this contest. I think that the UFC chose Dan Hooker because they thought he would be a bad matchup for Michael Chandler. I think that Dan Hooker believes he's a bad matchup for Michael Chandler. I think that there's a possibility that not only is Dan Hooker live to TKO or KO Michael Chandler, I think that there's a small possibility that he hurts Chandler, forces him into a bad wrestling exchange, and can use his excellent guillotine choke to defeat Michael Chandler. So I don't think that that's the most likely option, but I just think all options are on the table. I think Chandler's going to be in the deep end of the pool in a way that he hasn't been in quite some time, and I think that he may find difficulty in his initial UFC outing like other talented, credentialed fighters like Eddie Alvarez have when they came over from another organization to the UFC. So I'm backing Dan Hooker at minus 147. I have a 1.5 unit bet on Dan Hooker. I also have two other money line plays. I have a money line play, 1.5 units at minus 116 on Brad Tavares. It actually looks like Antonio Carlos Jr. is being bet to a favorite in this matchup. I understand why there's money coming in on both guys, but I could tell you why I backed Brad Tavares. Now, Brad Tavares, he was KO'd in his last fight. And that's obviously a red flag. But I would say that he took off the requisite amount of time. It's been over a year since his last fight. I think that he's going to come back with a refreshed chin. I think that he's coming into a fight against a guy who's never recorded a TKO finish in his career. Let me double check that. I believe that that's true. Shoeface. Antonio Carlos Jr. We're just going to check his share dog real quick. Sorry. Terrible audio here. Yeah. I was right about that. So he has 8 submission finishes and 2 decision wins in his career. He's 10-4. Listen, I think that Antonio Carlos Jr. is a good fighter. I think that his cardio is a liability. I think that his defense on the feet is not good. He stands there and absorbs a lot of punches. His head stays on the center line most of the time. He has some decent offensive weapons on the feet. He can crack as he moves forward to close space and try and wrestle people. And he's a good wrestler, don't get me wrong. I just think Brad Tavares is a very, very good anti-wrestler. I saw in the Elias Theodorov fight that I watched, he has really good instincts about what he needs to do, getting his back to the cage, getting double underhooks, getting his hips wide, spreading his base. He was doing a lot of things right, and he was doing them fast, and he was doing them on instinct. And he hit a nice switch. There was just some counter wrestling, some when I can't remember if it was the Elias Theodorov fight or another fight of his, but he was pushing away on the head when somebody went in for a single leg, and then throwing left hooks at a collar-tied opponent who was in on a single leg. I just thought that was a really smart move, and a really good way to discourage somebody from trying to wrestle you. So I think that there's a lot to like about Brad Tavares in this matchup stylistically. And I think that at the price, I was willing to play it because, again, I think that this is a favorable matchup for him. But I also understand that, he's coming off of 2 losses. He's coming off of 2 kind of one-sided losses. There's an argument that his chin may be diminished. But I just don't think Antonio Carlos Jr. is the guy to exploit that fact. And Brad Tavares, he was once submitted on The Ultimate Fighter by Court McGee, but he's never been submitted as a pro, and he's 17-6 in professional mixed martial arts. So he's had a lot of fights, and he's never been submitted. And I'm just not sure that Antonio Carlos Jr., who's on a 2-fight losing skid himself against Uriah Hall, and who else did he lose to? And Ian Heinisch, where he kind of just got anti-grappled. Not so much in the Uriah Hall fight. In the Uriah Hall fight, he got beat up on the feet and then also grappled Uriah quite thoroughly. So it was an interesting fight. I think Shoeface is coming into this fight with a lot of damage from the Uriah Hall fight too. I think that people shouldn't get that mistaken. So it's a close fight. It's at pick'em odds for a reason, but I think that people are fading Tavares here because of his past indiscretions. But most of his past losses are against talented strikers, and I think that this is a matchup that's actually more favorable to Brad's skills. So that's why I backed him here, and I'm hoping that he's going to come through for me, and I'm excited to see. And my last play here, it's my largest money line play, is Sara McMann to beat Julianna Pena. Here's the obvious red flag in this bet, and if it steers you off, no problem. Sara McMann is 40, okay? She's 9 years older than the 31-year-old Venezuelan vixen. Wow. Can you tell that I didn't sleep much? Julianna Pena, excuse me. My goodness. So, in this fight, the reason I'm backing Sara McMann is simple. Sara McMann is a far better athlete. She's stronger. She's going to have the better wrestling. The takedown defense rate for Julianna Pena is 28% in the UFC, which is really bad. She was taken down at will almost by Nico Montano, who struggled greatly in her UFC career, ironically as that sounds, given that she's a UFC champion. But I think that in this matchup, we're going to see Sara McMann establish takedowns in a dominant fashion and hold dominant positions. I think that she is very live to pass the guard. I think that she is, more, I don't want to jinx this, knock on wood, because I think probably the only path to victory for Julianna Pena would be to get a submission in this fight. That's how Sara McMann has tended to lose fights. But Sara's got a ton of power. She has submission skills of her own. She actually has more submissions than Julianna Pena does in her career. Julianna Pena has never secured a submission in the UFC, though she's had some, good entries and good attempts at submissions. But in her last fight, she got choked unconscious by Jermaine Durandamy, who's a kickboxer. And I think that Sara McMann, a Olympic silver medalist in wrestling, is going to be able to exert physical advantages, get takedowns, hold position. I think that Sara McMann could easily win a decision here. But I also think that Sara McMann is live to finish this fight because she will be in dominant control positions for the large portion, is my thoughts and views on the matchup. Understanding that we could see a shell of Sara McMann at 40 years old. She hasn't been as active lately, but she looked great in her last fight. She looked as good as I've ever seen her. I trust and liked Uriah Faber in her corner. I thought that he was doing a great job cornering her in that fight, and they had clear technical directives for her to follow, which led to an easy win for her over Lena Landsberg. So I back Sara McMann here. I got 2 units on Sara McMann at -122. So that is the vast bulk of my action, guys. I'll run you really quick through a sort of degenerate play that I have. Khalil Rountree and Marchin Prachnio. That fight is going down on the prelims, as far as I know, and I think Khalil Rountree is not a good enough fighter to back at his current odds. He's something like -350. He's been going back and forth between -325 and so I think that Khalil Rountree is likely to win this fight by knockout in the first round. However, like I said, Khalil hasn't inspired enough confidence over the course of his career, and especially pulling a few stunts, missing weight, just a few things along those lines. I think that it's hard to trust Khalil money line in this opportunity. However, his opponent, Marcin Prachnio, has been finished in the first round in all 3 of his UFC fights, okay? And Khalil Rountree and Marcin Prachnio have had a combined 30 professional MMA fights. 22 of those fights have ended in the very first round. For me, that is enough reason to bet 2 units at -125 that Marcin Prachnio, Khalil Rountree does not see round 2. I also placed a 1 unit hedge that the fight will not start round 3 at -240. So that is a little degenerate play, but I actually think it's very live to hit. I think it's hard to trust Khalil Rountree, but this is a setup fight, guys. The UFC wants Khalil Rountree to knock this guy out and give him his walking papers because he's already lost in the first round 3 times in the UFC. So, I think that we're going to see a fired up and motivated Marcin Prachnio, but he's a striker going against a better striker who hits harder, and I think that he's going to get dropped and finished early. However, because Khalil Rountree has so many red flags on him, I think that we take either the under 1.5, which I wouldn't blame you for taking, but I like the value more on fight does not start round 2, -125. That's how I chose to play that. The final play that I have on the night, I wanted to put together a little parlay for people that want to take what may be considered a safer bet. Now, there's no such thing as a safe bet, guys. Every fight is subject to unique variables. However, these were 2 outcomes that I felt pretty confident in that I didn't want to lay the juice on because they're pretty, pricey tags on these fighters. But I do think that they're very, very secure in their matchups. I think that they should have the advantages that will give them clear and concise victories. But I didn't want to pay the price tag on them. So the 2 fighters I'm referring to in this parlay, it's a 1 unit parlay. The parlay odds themselves are -139. I have Conor McGregor to win at -335, which is a bad price, but I do think that he's going to win anyway. So we're looking for bets that are going to cash for my parlay. And then I'm taking Amanda Ribas to defeat Marina Rodriguez, -310. I think that line is actually a little wide as well. I think that that's a competitive fight, but I do think that Amanda Ribas is the future of the 115-pound division. I think that she is growing and emerging as a contender, and I think that she is the more skilled and more well-rounded of the two individuals, and for that reason, I'm backing her in that contest. So, guys, thank you so much for sticking with me. Thank you for waiting for this content. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you will share it with somebody else that might enjoy it. I hope that you guys enjoy the fights. My name is Liam. I pick fights. You can find me on Instagram at Liam Picks Fights. You can find me on Twitter at Heslin Liam. You can like and subscribe to my YouTube videos. Guys, I don't just have, fight breakdowns and betting breakdowns. I have grappling highlights. I have my old wrestling highlights, all sorts of different things, all sorts of different content that I can produce if I find the right audience and the right market for it. So, guys, tell me what you want to hear more of. Tell me how I could be more of an asset to you. Also, I'm going to be coming to you with more content this week. I'm going to go over how my bets did for the Magny Chiesa card. Spoiler alert, 5 for 5. Your boy can't miss. Now, I'll also go over how we do for the bets tonight. So, knock on wood, and the good Lord willing, we'll have some success tonight, and hopefully we made the right reads. I hope that you guys got value out of this video. I hope that you like the analysis that I'm providing, and I hope that I can be an asset to you in stewarding your money, betting on mixed martial arts in the future. So thank you guys for your time and attention. God bless you all. Enjoy the fights.